Why would you focus on the part of the story that everyone else skips over? And at what point does violence become so graphic that it interferes with the entertainment value of the film? What's going on? I'm Morgan. I'm a director, cinematographer, here today to discuss the 2026 film Death of Robin Hood. If you want to get in on more film reviews, analysis, etc., please subscribe to this channel. So this is the third narrative feature from director Michael Sarnoski. While this is not his biggest production, it is creatively one of his bigger swings. This film follows a pattern where he is making films about characters reckoning with grief or trauma or identity rather than following a conventional plot line. So we all think we know Robin Hood. He was this happy little Disney whimsical fox, but this movie couldn't be more opposite. Rather than adapting the typical Robin Hood myth, he's reinterpreted this ballad called The Death of Robin Hood into this story that functions more like an epilogue. So if you spent your whole life and dedicated so much to becoming someone everyone remembers, what happens when you can no longer be this person? This film shifts the dramatic importance from becoming a legend to living with the consequences of being one. So why would Sarnoski do this? These happily ever after moments, they aren't bad, they're just selective. By starting where the myth ends, we can explore the human complexity that these stories often leave behind. The violence in the opening of this film is so abrupt and uncompromising, it actively resists your ability to enjoy it. The violence isn't meant to entertain, it's meant to demythologize this character that we all think we know. These sequences are abrupt, humiliating, chaotic, morally confusing. Nobody's really looking cool here. Contrast that with something like Gladiator or Lord of the Rings. Aragorn's partaking in violence, but he's always morally justified in doing so. Violence is cinematic and heroic, and death has meaning and spectacle. With this, you're not quite as sure. Robin Hood shoots a kid in the back of the head with an arrow. Lil Jon's wife dies. Nobody really feels like they win. And at the end of it, you're kind of asking, was this all even worth it? This violence, it often feels like an inheritance that he's carrying around with him. And it often creates another problem, not another solution. So I kept asking myself, did this violence cross a line into excess? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this discomfort was actually part of the point. If this film wants to strip away all this myth-making, the violence being so genuinely hard to watch is actually a mechanism of demythologizing this character we think we all know. So we're diving in on the cinematography here. We've got Pat Scola here. He's a returning collaborator with Sarnoski. This thing is shot on 35mm with Panavision anamorphics in Northern Ireland. It doesn't feel like it's borrowing from this modern day medieval tradition, and many of the cinematic choices are made in service to the story and characters of the film. The visual inspiration for this thing was this medieval painting called The Death of Robin Hood. Sarnoski showed this to Scola, it sounds like, and he really ran with this idea. And before I get into it, it does sound like a little bit corny, like, oh, like, homie's inspired by paintings, but honestly, when we look at these things side by side, you'll see the direct crossovers with the visual language and how he can create these compositions that reinforce these narrative elements. We got this Caravaggio painting that Scola referenced as the inspiration for the lighting and the mood in Robin Hood's bedchambers. What's really interesting is how he has borrowed the eye path from this painting. Eye goes right to the window, goes to the beam of light, goes to the faces. It's the same thing with this one. Obviously, this is a BTS shot. First, we got to the window, to the beam, to the faces, to the hands, to the items on the table. This is a direct translation of this painting into the visual language of the film. It's so interesting to me how your eye and your interpretation and visual experience with this piece is choreographed through this treatment of light. Throughout this whole story, Robin is contending with his own myth, and the cinematography mirrors exactly that. The light becomes this revelation, and the darkness becomes this uncertainty. Okay, so we're dropping in on this other painting that he's referenced. This one's called Girl Reading a Letter at an Open Window. The story behind this is this woman's having some sort of extramarital affair, reading this letter from this lover, and is she going to continue this illicit relationship or not going to? The element I want to point out here is this curtain, this thing's called the repoussoir. Okay, then we're going to drop in here on some frames, and you'll notice the same thing going on here. This echoes this same painterly device that Vermeer used. These foreground elements, they frame the image and simultaneously obscure part of it, increasing the depth and directing the attention. And suddenly these trees, they aren't just trees in a cool shot. They're functioning compositionally just like that curtain. They create this depth, mystery, and in the story with the character grappling with his own myth, these trees are almost functioning like a metaphorical jail cell. Compositions here aren't meant to glorify Robin Hood, they're meant to contextualize him within the larger narrative. Because think about it, before cinema existed, painters had to do all the same things filmmakers had to do, but with one frame. So every compositional choice here, it's in service of the same central idea here, exploring the humanity inside a myth. All right, so we're hopping in on some numbers here, or some letters rather, with this report card. We got the editing. You've got this ultra-violent beginning mixed with this introspective reckoning second half that serves as kind of this yin and yang. This thing is landing at an A- for me. I've already talked at length about this, but this is one of the best shot films I've seen in a long time. Every compositional choice feels intentional and feels like it's in service to the story. This thing is a heavy, heavy A+. This story is honestly atypical. It feels like the third act of a larger epic piece. This was a pretty heavy creative gamble, and I think it's both simultaneously one of its biggest strengths and one of its biggest weaknesses. I see why they did it, but honestly, a part of me wanted to see the beginning of what this film was. I don't know if this is going to have a huge amount of mainstream appeal. With the characters, this is maybe one of the best performances I've seen Hugh Jackman ever deliver. This performance felt very morally confused and very open to interpretation, and there leaves a lot of space for the audience to project their own interpretation onto this character. With that being said, this was less of an ensemble cast than the films in this genre typically have. A lot of the supporting characters, performances, and writing felt relatively thin. Because of that, this thing is going to get a B- for character. The music here, this thing is landing at an A-. I don't know if this unconventional story premise is going to work for everyone. The violence was at times a little overbearing and extremely graphic. At the same time, the Jackman performance and the cinematography were reason alone to go see this film. The more I sat with this thing and the more I thought about it, the ideas revealed themselves and I gained a greater appreciation for it. So this thing is landing at a very solid A for me. Did you see this thing? Let me know below. Please subscribe. See you in the next one.